One thing I haven't mentioned yet about the Book of Esther, and this seems like a good time to mention it, is that not once in the book is God ever mentioned, let alone described as saying or doing anything. Does that mean God is absent? Let's find out. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. We saw yesterday how Haman, the highest official in Persia under King Ahasuerus, cast lots, or pur, to determine the most auspicious time to execute his plot to eliminate all the Jews in the Persian Empire. Having received the blessing of Ahasuerus, Haman had sent out a royal decree in the king's name instructing the regional governors what they should do and when. And it was no secret either. Everyone knew what was coming, Persians and Jews alike. But with 11 months between hatching the plot and executing it, there was a lot of time. Time enough for Mordecai to hatch a counterplan. This part of the story begins when Mordecai reads the king's decree, or rather Haman's decree in the king's name. He goes into full public mourning, rending his clothes, putting on sackcloth and ashes, and crying loudly in public. When Esther, the queen, who is also his niece, hears of it, she sends one of her servants with new clothes. Apparently, she doesn't want him making a public spectacle. Mordecai, of course, refuses the new clothes and sends a message back to Esther telling her of Haman's plot and asking her to go to the king to appeal his royal decree. That's where we start in today's reading from Esther. Hatach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hatach and gave him a message from Mordecai saying, "All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. I myself have not been called to come in to the king for 30 days. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for such a time as this." Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. As you can see, Esther is reluctant to approach the king since no one is allowed to enter the king's chamber without having first been summoned by the king, and the penalty is almost certain death. Mordecai's response to her is first to tell her that she may die for entering the king's chamber unbidden, but she will surely die if he allows Haman's plot to go through. But then he says one of the most important statements in this book. "Who knows," he says, "perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this." While Mordecai makes no reference to God, it is certainly possible that his implication is that God has put her in her position as queen for precisely this reason, to protect her people. That's the funny thing about life, isn't it? We often find ourselves in a position to do good that we never thought about. Is God's hand in it or not? We never really know for sure, at least not in this life. But we Presbyterians do believe that God does from time to time call people into particular positions in order to do certain things. We call it providence. But we never know for sure, at least not in the usual sense of being able to prove something with objective evidence. And it's often only after the fact that we can begin to perceive God's providential hand in things. The way Mordecai introduces the idea to Esther is certainly suggestive. Who knows? When we return tomorrow, Esther begins putting the pieces of a plan together to save her people. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.